I hope you can all hear me. Yeah? Perfect. Okay, first things first, we're going to start this off. Actually, not with me talking that much, but with you participating. So we're going to do this little Kahoot, it's called. It's a website. Let me just bring it up so that we can start it off. You go to kahoot.it. Okay, that's how you spell Kahoot. Yeah, where is the website? Okay, I need to set my display. Yeah, this is the website. You just type in kahoot.it. We're going to hear some music as well. Uh-oh. Oh, of course, no internet.
There's Wi-Fi.
There's Wi-Fi. It's got to creative test.
Okay. See, I tested everything except for the Wi-Fi.
It's okay, it happens.
And it's working. We're there. So for those of you that need Wi-Fi, you know what to do as well. Okay, so you go on kahoot.it. We get the music as well. And basically you need to put in this number in the prompt that you get. And I should get a number, 1 player in, 2, 3. A few more. We're up to 8, 10. Once we get to 20, we go for it. More? Shall we just start? Anyone still trying to get in? Wait for it. Okay, let's start. So this is basically how it's going to happen. We'll see some questions on the screen, and you have to. There's no right or wrong in the questions. Let me do this. There's no right or wrong. It's just, let's say, giving your current opinion before the talk, and my talk, and before the discussion that we will have later on. Okay? So, start. Are you ready? Okay, first question. How do humans manage to learn language? Is it by repetition, red? Mental association of sounds, blue? Rules, yellow or orange? And we are born with the skin, green. What do you think? Just give it a guess if you don't know. We've got... Okay, a lot of people say mental associations of sound, repetition. Some say we're born with the skill. One person there, rules, maybe, who knows? We'll see. Next. Well, never mind the score. I just left that on automatic, whatever Kahoot gave me. Can a machine learn language? What do you think? Yes or no? Easy. Red is yes, no is blue. Just to confuse. Let's see. Coming up.
What do you mean by language?
17 said yes, 6 said no. Edward is being philosophical already.
My my fault, I asked him. Depends what you mean by language.
Okay, next one. Do you imagine talking to a machine in the same way that you can talk to a human is possible? Red, no way. Blue, maybe depends on the subject. And yellow or orange, whatever it is. Yes, I would do so very comfortably. 2, 1, and we're done. Okay, 11, depends on the subject. 5 of you say no way, and 7 of you say yes, comfortably on any subject. Cool, okay. And the last one, would you allow a machine to do certain tasks on your behalf, like booking appointments for you, driving you around? Red, no way. Blue, might be okay with booking an appointment. Yellow, yes, if I can trust the machine. And the green is an unconditional yes. Chup, chup. Thinking, thinking. I like the music that Kahoot put in the background of this. Yes, if I can trust the machine was the majority. Next up, might be okay with booking an appointment. Some no way and some unconditional yeses. Okay, so that's just to get you thinking a little bit, yeah, about machines, language, yeah. But, okay, so I didn't really introduce myself. My area of expertise, let's say. When I was young, I was really good at breaking stuff, breaking dolls, particularly. All my dolls ended up looking like punk rock, not dolls anymore. As I moved on in life, I ended up breaking up words instead. And nowadays, my interest is more about seeing the grammatical components within a word. And more than that, more than doing this myself, I'm more interested in getting a machine to do this and seeing how a machine could learn to do this, maybe automatically, without me having to tell the machine, oh, listen, this part means that, you know? Because as well, maybe I'm not that good in Maltese, and I'd like the machine to just learn that. Okay, but let's backtrack a little bit, yeah? Because we're already thinking of machines in terms of language. But the first question that I like to ask myself is, okay, how do we as humans actually learn language? Maybe we won't open the discussion from now. Maybe it's a good point to have a good question to have as a discussion later. And by no means am I an expert in what is called language acquisition in children. Yeah, that's a very specific area of study where people actually follow how children learn language. But I like to look at that and think, okay, can I get a computer program to do the same? So I do like to think about this, and I like to observe children, how they talk, what do they say. One thing that we definitely researchers in this field observe is that at some point in their children, as they're learning language, they start to overgeneralize certain aspects. So for instance, if in English, to produce the past tense, we use an ed at the end, yeah, if I have play, I played, yeah? children at some point start to apply it to any verb. So they will say, I sleeped, I go'd, I do'd. Yeah? And then at some point they learn that, okay, these are the exceptions, these are exceptions, and there's a proper form to say this correctly. So someone chose that we learn rules. Are we actually learning rules, or are we just having some form of sounds, associating sounds to certain things that happen? Okay, and again, I think one of the interesting questions to ask is this a skill that we are actually born with? So again, researchers look at really infants, really before they actually start uttering words, and what they find is that the sounds, the initial, let's call them primal sounds, are universal to all babies. But within the age 6-8 months, it's kind of, babies can understand any type of sound. But within a few months, we're talking 3-4 month gap, they start understanding only the sounds that are present in their language, in their native language, and they lose the sounds of other languages that are present only in other languages. Okay? So for instance, this was a particular study with Japanese and American sounds. Okay, when I'm talking sounds, it's really the sound of a letter, that small sound. And they noticed that after a few months, the child no longer gives attention to those particular sounds in the foreign language, unless they are exposed to those sounds via human contact. Okay? So these things are quite interesting. And again, you know, we see more in terms of language development. How do we develop words? So here I have a nice recording that I took from this wonderful, really interesting TED Talk. This is a scientist who's particularly interested in language acquisition. So when he had a child, he decided to wire up his home and track his son's language development in his early years. And then did fascinating analysis with this. So we're going to hear the development of the word water over the period of about, I believe, 8 months. And it's gonna be this. It's amazing to hear over time there were these little breaks, but still mainly using the word gaga, but little breaks where the water started to become more clear, and then all of a sudden, boom, it happened. Okay? And this is not, we see this over and over with several words. So it's really fascinating that, you know, from a human perspective, there's kind of a lot going on, and all of a sudden there is like this clarity in how words are acquired. So that's really, really interesting. But again, what happens with a machine? Yeah, let me just show you this. This is a snippet of a piece of text. Don't bother reading it all. I'm actually going to zoom in. Of something that was generated, a human script prompt was given to the software. This is quite recent, and the computer managed to generate something really creative about unicorns, you know. So I really believe that we're at a point with language, we call this area language processing, natural language processing, where we're doing really interesting stuff, and we're really seeing interesting results. We're really pushing our boundaries in terms of what a computer can produce. But yeah, again, I'll step back and think, okay, what are we expecting in terms of language? What do we want with our devices? Why do we want a computer to be able to understand language in the first place? Yeah? And, well, in my opinion, one of the first things that comes to mind is we want more of a natural interface. I'd love one day, when I have to prepare for a presentation like this, to be able to just walk around the room and have my machine just listen to me, and me just blurting out ideas, and the machine can do all the searching for the different images that I want to include in my slides. And really and truly, from a technological perspective, we're not that far away from having something like this to be possible. Maybe we still see it as science fiction, but there is the possibility, there is the technology. Maybe it's not yet 100% mature to understand everything, but definitely, for instance, with image search, I don't know if you've ever tried using something like Google image search to look up for an image. You get pretty decent search results, yeah? And this is something that's been happening in the last 5 years, where we're, you know, connecting words to images. We're actually able to create software that can recognize text, its meaning, and link it up to images, because it also recognizes the objects that are present in the image. So all these things that are happening can be nicely linked to offer us, let's say, a service, more functionality from our devices. So I believe that eventually we'll be using less and less of these physical interfaces, and we'll be using more our voices, our natural language, however we're comfortable to communicate. And I also believe that, yeah, I always have the artificial intelligence at the back of my mind, yeah, where we should be moving more towards collaboration and cooperation with our devices. So our devices should be a force, a tool for us to be able to collaborate and cooperate better, rather than just plain old functions. Okay, some more examples in terms of how we process text from a software perspective. Here I took a piece of text from the Times of Malta from today, something in the business section, which usually I don't even bother to read. So I have no idea about what companies are mentioned. I didn't even know that there is something like the Malta Entrepreneur of the Year event. Okay, but apparently there is. So with something like this, nowadays, we have the software, we have the possibility of, for instance, recognizing what are called entities. We can recognize automatically things like names, organizations. We can recognize Entrepreneur of the Year as something, as a structure, let's say, on its own that has meaning. Okay? And you might tell me, okay, you know, it's interesting, but what can you do with this information? Yeah? Remember that certain things we might take for granted in terms of meaning of text. When we read something, there's a lot going on in our heads, in our brains, that we take for granted. We just understand something. Whilst if we're trying to get a machine to understand that piece of text, then we really start from zero. For a machine, text is just characters. And a word, it has on its own no meaning at all, nothing, it's just symbols, yeah? So we have to always find ways of giving that text some form of meaning. And so there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind this type of software. We just get like the end result. But we can also, from there, go to something like, for instance, seeing the sentiment of text. In this case, this is very neutral, yeah? But we also try to analyze in terms of sentiment, how let's say, positive or negative a text can be, in terms of the words that it uses, in terms of how things are expressed. We analyze also the structure of sentences. So then we go in terms of how words relate to each other. Their different properties from a linguistic perspective. Words can have a lot of properties. So initially I mentioned that I look at breaking words down and looking at the grammatical meaning. But there's so many different layers when it comes from a linguistic perspective that makes, at least for me, this area so fascinating. So definitely, for instance, if this text had to be Maltese, not only, for instance, we would have to look at agreement where there's something like a noun in singular, there would have to be grammatical agreement between the words as well. The choice of words can be different according to the grammatical properties of words. And then we have also stuff like finding relations between words. Okay? So for instance, we have a word like apple, which might mean the company or a device, but it might also mean a fruit. Yeah. So how can we distinguish? I didn't do anything. Okay. How can we distinguish between, in text, when apple means fruit or it means the company? Okay. One of the things that I'd like to show you is that, for instance, one of the techniques that we use is this. Probably you can't see this. We'll try to zoom in. But for instance, this is one of the ways how we go about representing words and trying to relate them together. Okay? So we get, let's say, a corpus, we call a collection of texts from newspapers, from books, and so on. And we see how words co-occur, how words happen next to each other. And something like the word apple, for instance, I might see that sometimes it is used with sentences where other fruit are mentioned. And sometimes it is used where other businesses are mentioned. So in that sense, I can say, okay, sometimes it's closer to these words, and sometimes it's closer to these other words. Okay? But then we have a way of representing all this with a lot of complicated mathematics and we throw all these words, we give them a numeric representation so that we can plot them nicely into a space. Okay? And funnily enough, the space kind of makes sense. So I'm just going to pick up a random word over here. Let's see. Complexity. Okay? And I see that, I went too far in. Let's go next to. This is actually the space. That's a bit difficult to navigate when you're doing a presentation.
DMI.
Again. Okay, let's try this. So we're complexity. Come on, zoom in. And, well, okay, it's not going to be very clear for you. But next to it, I have algorithm, which is a computer science term. So there, complexity and algorithm make sense together. But I also have things like limits, maximum, reduce, increases, measures. I have a whole list here at the side. Okay? So, let's see, stay. Yes. This is just like a little demonstration from a computational perspective, what we end up with. Back to this. And so far, I've mentioned text, right? I've mentioned that we're able to extract information out of text. But the thing is that now we're doing the same thing with stuff like speech. Without actually going to the text representation, we just look at the sound wave, okay, of an utterance of a person talking, and we start identifying the parts that might provide some form of emotion. Again, one of the things that we mentioned in the Kahoot question was whether you would trust a machine, the issue of trust, whether you would trust a machine to, let's say, book appointments for you or something. Yeah, is that possible? Here, I'm going to show you an example, small example, of a system that was demoed to first book a haircut appointment and then a restaurant reservation.
So how can I help you? Hi, I'm calling to book a women's haircut for a client. I'm looking for something on May 3rd. Sure, give me 1 second. Sure, what time are you looking for around? At 12 p.m. We do not have a 12 p.m. available. The closest we have to that is a 1:15. Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.? Depending on what service she would like. What service is she looking for? Just a woman's haircut for now? Okay, we have a 10 o'clock. 10 a.m. is fine. Okay, what's her first name? The first name is Lisa. Okay, perfect. So I will see Lisa at 10 o'clock on May 3rd. Okay, great. Thanks. Great. Have a great day. Bye. See how may I hear you?
Hi, I'd like to reserve a table for Wednesday the 7th.
For 7 people?
It's for 4 people.
4 people with
Next Wednesday at 6 p.m.
Oh, actually we serve for like after like 5 people. For 4 people you can come.
How long is the wait usually to be seated?
When tomorrow or weekday or?
For next Wednesday, the 7th.
Oh no, it's not too busy. You can come for 4 people, okay?
Oh, I gotcha. Thanks.
Okay, so this is really like research stage. This type of conversation assistant has been launched only in certain areas of the United States. And the interesting thing is that here we have the machine that is really talking very close to how a human would express themselves, like using the phrase gotcha. And as well, the type of interactions when a misunderstanding occurs, it's really getting somewhere. Yeah, it's fascinating to listen to these type of conversations. So the more we see these type of advances in language, the more we should be able to trust our devices to handle these type of tasks. Yeah, because then we know, okay, they won't break with a simple misunderstanding, and the task can actually be carried out. One last thing that I like to, not again, one last thing that I'd like to, come on, next slide, mention is the idea of bias in AI. And I feel that this is always important to raise awareness as well about. In AI, what we do is we just get a bunch of data and we train on that, okay? So for instance, with language, if I get my data, let's say from the Times of Malta, I'm only learning the way that the Times of Malta journalists express themselves, which might be different from other English newspapers. So that creates a bit of a bias, because I don't have a complete representation. And we have AI systems that use language. So for instance, here I'm mentioning a system that looked at human rights judgments, and they created an AI system that would try to predict the judgment of a case. And it was accurate 79% of the time, which, okay, for such a situation, I would consider that to be low. I want it to be closer to 100%, yeah? But apart from that, there's always the aspect of the human bias. So, is the judge fair in the first place in a particular judgment? That is still present within the text, no matter what type of algorithm I come up with. So the first instance that I believe that we should be, experts from my field should be actually looking at, is where the biases are and how those translate into our algorithms. Yeah. So that's all from me for today. I look forward to the discussion. I don't know if I have to say anything else.